All right, everyone. This evening we're going to imagine, if you will, the bustling streets of Constantinople, the magnificent capital of the Byzantine Empire. The air is alive with the chatter of merchants, the clatter of horse-drawn carts, and the distant murmur of voices from the hippodrome. You, perhaps a busy merchant, a government official, or even just a curious citizen. There are no smartphones, no emails, certainly no instant messaging. So how do you get your critical information, your everyday errands, across miles of ancient landscape? You turn to the sky, to the silent, swift wings of a feathered messenger. We're talking about a time when the Byzantines used pigeon posts for everyday errands. And let me tell you, if you were relying on anything slower, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you do, maybe drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see how our little community stretches across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the vast and intricate Byzantine Empire, stretching across continents and encompassing diverse peoples, the challenge of communication was monumental. Information was the lifeblood of the empire, crucial for governing, defending borders, and conducting trade. But roads were often slow and perilous, fraught with bandits or seasonal human messengers on horseback or foot were susceptible to delays, capture, or exhaustion. Imagine trying to send an urgent message about a fluctuating grain price, or a sudden military movement, across hundreds of miles using only human couriers. It could take days, even weeks, by which time the information might be utterly useless. This communication gap created an enormous need for faster, more reliable methods. This is where the humble pigeon, specifically the homing pigeon, fluttered into the scene as an unsung hero of ancient communication. While human messengers were slow and susceptible, the bird offered a unique advantage: speed and directness. They weren't bound by roads or rivers. They flew straight, high above the chaotic world below. This made them invaluable for delivering time-sensitive information, giving those who mastered their use a distinct advantage. Historians still argue whether the pigeon post was as widespread for everyday errands as it was for official or military use, but its existence for civilian purposes is well documented. It's like they had their own ancient version of express delivery, but instead of a package, it was a tiny scroll tied to a bird's leg. And let's be honest, that's way cooler than a drone, isn't it? This pressing need for rapid communication across a sprawling empire directly fueled the development and widespread adoption of pigeon posts, transforming these ordinary birds into indispensable tools of governance, commerce, and even personal connection. So, how did these seemingly ordinary birds transform into the sophisticated messengers of the Byzantine Empire? It all comes down to the fascinating natural instincts and careful training of the homing pigeon. You see a flock of pigeons fluttering around a grand Byzantine courtyard, perhaps pecking at discarded crumbs. They look like any other bird, but among them are special individuals, selectively bred and meticulously trained for a singular purpose: to find their way home, no matter the distance. The core of their ability lies in an incredible, almost mystical, innate homing instinct. These pigeons possess an unparalleled sense of navigation, utilizing a combination of the Earth's magnetic field, the sun's position, olfactory cues, and even visual landmarks they've learned on previous flights. Imagine having a built-in GPS that never runs out of battery and doesn't require a map. That's essentially what these birds had. Training a homing pigeon was a meticulous process that began when the birds were very young. A young pigeon would first be taken short distances from its home loft and released, gradually increasing the distance as it matured and consistently found its way back. This wasn't just a casual exercise. It was a rigorous conditioning program. The bird learned to associate its home loft with safety, food, and its mate, creating an incredibly powerful incentive to return. Think of it like repeatedly sending a child on an errand just a block away, then 2 blocks, then across town, always rewarding them when they return. Eventually, they know the way instinctively. Historians still argue whether the precise magnetic compass theory was fully understood by ancient breeders, or if it was simply observed through trial and error. But their success rates speak for themselves. It's like they had discovered a fundamental cheat code for avian navigation, long before anyone invented a sextant, let alone a satellite. The selection of breeding stock was also paramount. Only pigeons that consistently demonstrated strong homing abilities, speed, and resilience were chosen to produce the next generation of messengers. This selective breeding, practiced over centuries, refined their natural instincts, making them even more reliable and efficient. These weren't just wild birds, they were specialized athletes, trained and honed for their aerial delivery service. When a message needed to be sent, a pigeon would be transported to the distant location in a special cage. Attached to its leg would be a small, lightweight scroll containing the message. Once released, its sole directive, driven by instinct and training, was to fly straight home to its loft, where its anxious owner or recipient awaited its arrival. This remarkable combination of innate ability and dedicated human training transformed the humble pigeon into a vital communication tool, enabling the Byzantines to bridge distances and accelerate information flow in ways that would surprise many modern observers. It's a feathered marvel, truly. With the remarkable abilities of the homing pigeon understood, let's now consider how this feathered technology was integrated into the very fabric of the Byzantine state, forming sophisticated imperial pigeon networks for official communication. You stand in a high tower overlooking Constantinople, the golden horn glistening below, and you watch as a small bird is released from a specially constructed loft. This isn't just a pet. This is a vital cog in the machinery of empire. The Byzantine emperors and their top officials quickly recognized strategic value of rapid communication across their vast territories. They established elaborate networks of pigeon lofts, strategically placed in key administrative centers, military outposts, and major cities throughout the empire. Imagine a series of relay stations, not for horses, but for birds, ensuring that messages could travel further and faster than by any human means alone. These imperial pigeon systems were meticulously organized. Each loft would house a trained flock of pigeons, carefully maintained and tended by specialized keepers. When a message needed to be sent from a distant city back to the capital, a pigeon from Constantinople's loft that had previously been transported to that city would be used. Upon release, he would instinctively fly directly back to its home. This one-way communication was incredibly efficient for conveying urgent news, decrees, or reports back to the central government. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine pigeon post was as formally structured as, say, the Abbasid pigeon service, but its consistent use for imperial affairs is well documented. It's like they had their own ancient version of a secure, express government courier service, but powered by wings and instinct instead of wheels and engines. And let's be honest, trying to intercept a pigeon is probably a lot harder than ambushing a messenger on a road, isn't it? These networks allowed the emperor in Constantinople to receive timely updates from distant governors, assess military threats, and issue commands with a speed previously unimaginable. This efficiency in communication contributed significantly to the stability and longevity of the Byzantine Empire, enabling faster responses to crises and better coordination of resources. Pigeon Post facilitated the rapid transmission of news regarding rebellions, invasions, or significant political developments. It gave the central authority a distinct advantage in maintaining control over its far-flung Think of it. A general at the frontier could send news of a barbarian incursion back to the capital in a matter of hours or a day, rather than days or weeks, allowing for a much quicker mobilization of imperial forces. The speed and reliability of these avian couriers truly revolutionized the way the Byzantine state managed its vast domain, transforming the seemingly simple act of a bird flying home into a powerful instrument of imperial control and governance. Building upon the imperial networks, the strategic value of Pigeon Post truly soared in the realm of military communication, where speed and secrecy could mean the difference between victory and defeat. You find yourself on the rugged frontier of the Byzantine Empire, perhaps a besieged fortress or a distant military encampment, where every piece of intelligence is vital, and time is measured in survival. Imagine a general, cut off from his main army, needing to send an urgent plea for reinforcements, or report enemy troop movements. Human messengers were too slow, too vulnerable to interception. This is where the military pigeon truly shone. Trained carrier pigeons would accompany military detachments, carried in special lightweight cages. When a critical message arose, a tiny scroll would be attached to a pigeon's leg, and the bird would be released, its instincts driving it straight back to its home loft at headquarters or a secure imperial hub. The speed with which these birds could carry intelligence was revolutionary. News of a flanking maneuver, the successful breach of a wall, or the discovery of an enemy's weakness could reach commanders miles away in a fraction of the time it would take a horseman. This timely information allowed for quicker tactical decisions, faster deployment of reserves, and a significant strategic advantage on the battlefield. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine military pigeon post achieved the same legendary status as say, the Egyptian or Syrian pigeon services during the Crusades, but its consistent use for crucial intelligence as well. It's like they had their own ancient version of a real-time battle update system, complete with feathered drones. And let's be honest, trying to shoot down a tiny, fast-flying pigeon in ancient warfare was probably a lot harder than trying to catch a human scout. Unless, of course, you had a very well-trained falcon on your side, which, surprisingly, some forces did. Beyond battlefield tactics, pigeons were vital for communicating during siege. A besieged city could release pigeons with messages detailing their dwindling supplies or the strength of their defenses, hoping to reach allies outside. Conversely, relieving armies could send messages of encouragement or impending arrival back into the city. These messages, though small, were like bolstering morale and coordinating desperate defenses or crucial breakthroughs. The security of these messages was also paramount. Sometimes, messages would be coded or written in obscure shorthand to prevent enemy interpretation if the pigeon happened to fall into the wrong hands. The reliance on these feathered couriers demonstrates a deep understanding of their unique capabilities in a military context. They truly revolutionized the speed and reach of battlefield intelligence, making the Byzantine military machine even more formidable. It's a silent, swift, and surprisingly effective form of ancient reconnaissance, all thanks to a bird's innate desire to simply go home. Beyond the grand scale of imperial and military operations, the humble pigeon found a surprisingly practical niche in the bustling world of Byzantine commerce, becoming a swift messenger for the merchant's winged word. You're now in a crowded Byzantine marketplace, the air thick with the scent of spices and the haggling of vendors. A merchant paces anxiously, awaiting news from a distant port where his precious cargo of silk or grain is due to arrive. In an era before telegraphs or email, information delays meant lost opportunities, or worse, financial ruin. This is where carrier pigeons became invaluable tools for savvy traders. Imagine a network of merchants, each with their own pigeon loft, strategically placed in key trading cities like Alexandria, Antioch, or Venice, or connected to Constantinople. Merchants would use pigeons to receive urgent updates on market prices from distant locations. Did the price of pepper just plummet in Egypt? Has a rival shipment been delayed in Syria? Such information, delivered by pigeon in a matter of hours or a day, instead of weeks by ship or caravan, could allow a merchant to make crucial decisions, whether to hold their stock, redirect a shipment, or secure a new deal before competitors had the same information. It was the original real-time market data, delivered by feather. Historians still argue whether the volume of commercial pigeon traffic rivaled that of state messages, but its anecdotal presence in merchant accounts suggests its significant utility. It's like they had their own ancient stock ticker, but instead of flashing lights, it was a fluttering bird. And let's be honest, getting your market updates from a pigeon sounds a lot more dignified than furiously refreshing your phone, doesn't it? Pigeons were also used to relay news of ship arrivals or a captain approaching Constantinople could release a pigeon, alerting the merchant in the city that their cargo was imminent, allowing them to prepare dock space, secure laborers, and arrange for distribution. This foresight was a significant competitive advantage. Conversely, merchants could send pigeons to their agents in distant cities, providing instructions or confirming orders. The messages were typically brief, highly condensed, and often coded to protect sensitive financial information from prying eyes. Or the talents of rival birds, I suppose. The ability of these birds to traverse vast distances, crossing seas and mountains, made them far more reliable than human couriers, who might be waylaid by weather, bandits, or simply the slow pace of ancient travel. This innovative use of pigeon post allowed Byzantine merchants to operate with a level of agility and responsiveness that was truly remarkable for their time. It transformed the flow of commercial information, turning these humble birds into silent partners, interconnected web of ancient trade, proving that even back then, speed truly was money. Beyond the grand scale of empire and the shrewd calculations of commerce, the Byzantine pigeon also served a surprisingly intimate purpose, becoming a conduit for private pigeon post, allowing everyday citizens to send personal messages across distances. You're a worried parent in a Byzantine town, your child studying in a distant monastery, or perhaps a young lover yearning for news from your beloved in another city. Writing a letter was easy, but getting it there swiftly and reliably was another matter entirely. This is where the less formal, but equally vital, use of carrier pigeons for personal communication fluttered into play. Imagine the relief of seeing a familiar pigeon land on your windowsill, a tiny scroll tied to its leg, bringing news from a loved one. While not everyone owned homing pigeons, they were still a specialized asset. Access to them might have been arranged through a local pigeon keeper, a wealthier friend, or even a monastery that maintained its own flock. For a small fee or a favor, you could send a brief personal message, a far more reliable option than waiting for a slow caravan or trusting a stranger to hand-deliver your words. These messages were typically short, perhaps a confirmation of health, an update on family news, or a simple expression of affection. Think of it as their ancient version of a text message, concise and personal, delivered by wing. Historians still argue whether the frequency of private pigeon use was widespread or more sporadic, but accounts suggest that for those who could access it, it was a treasured means of staying connected. It's like they had their own ancient version of a private social network, but with real feathers and a lot more flapping. And honestly, getting a personal message delivered by a bird probably felt a lot more special than an email, didn't it? The emotional impact of receiving such a message would have been profound. In a world where communication was slow and uncertain, the arrival of a pigeon meant anxieties could be eased, important family news shared, or simply the warmth of a loved one's thoughts delivered directly to your doorstep. It bridged geographical divides in a deeply personal way. Of course, these private messages were also subject to the same limitations as official ones: one-way travel, and the inherent risks of nature. A hawk, a storm, or simply a disoriented bird could mean your precious message never arrived. But for those moments when speed and certainty mattered for personal reasons, the pigeon offered an unparalleled service. It truly humanized the pigeon post, extending its incredible utility beyond the battlefields and marketplaces into the quiet, everyday lives of Byzantine citizens, bringing comfort and connection on silent wings. To sustain these incredible pigeon postal services, whether for imperial, commercial, or private use, the Byzantines developed dedicated pigeon lofts and meticulous care routines for their feathered messengers. You walk into a specially constructed building, perhaps a sturdy tower, or a section of a wealthy villa, filled with the soft cooing of birds and the rustle of wings. This isn't just a shed, it's a carefully designed home for their invaluable avian couriers. Imagine rows of individual nesting boxes, each providing a secure and comfortable space for a pair of pigeons. These lofts were designed to be both secure from predators and to provide optimal conditions for the bird's health and well-being. Cleanliness was paramount, as disease could quickly decimate a flock and cripple a communication line. So, handlers would meticulously clean the lofts, ensuring fresh straw and dry conditions. The care of these pigeons was a specialized profession. Keepers would be responsible for feeding the birds a balanced diet, usually a mix of grains like barley, wheat, and lentils, ensuring they had ample energy for their demanding flights. Access to fresh water was also crucial. They understood that a well-nourished, healthy bird was a reliable bird. This wasn't just a hobby. It was a serious investment in the empire's communication infrastructure. Historians still argue whether the training methods were uniformly applied across the vast empire, or if local variations existed. But the consistent quality of the pigeons suggests a highly skilled practice. It's like they had their own ancient version of avian veterinarians and specialized nutritionists, all focused on getting those birds in peak flying condition. And frankly, it's a lot more involved than just leaving out a bird feeder, isn't it? Beyond basic sustenance, pigeon keepers would also manage the breeding of their flocks, carefully selecting birds with proven homing abilities to ensure the continuation of strong lines. They understood the principles of selective breeding long before genetics was a formal science. The relationship between the keeper and their pigeons was often one of profound familiarity. The birds would recognize their handler, and the keeper would know the individual quirks and strengths of each bird. This bond, combined with rigorous training, fostered the pigeons' innate desire to return home to their familiar loft and trusted keeper. The security of these lofts was also a concern. High walls, protective netting, and careful monitoring prevented rival forces from tampering with or stealing these valuable communication assets. The sophisticated infrastructure and dedicated care for these avian messengers demonstrate the Byzantines' profound commitment to maintaining robust communication channels, transforming what seems like a simple bird into a finely tuned instrument of imperial life. For these amazing feathered couriers to carry vital information, the messages themselves had to be perfectly adapted for avian delivery. This meant ingenious methods of message encoding and miniaturization. You watch a Byzantine scribe, not with a quill and a large parchment, but with a tiny, sharp stylus and a delicate piece of paper-thin material, Imagine trying to write an urgent military dispatch or a complex commercial update on something no bigger than your thumbnail. The challenge was immense. The writing material itself was crucial. Papyrus or fine parchment, sometimes even very thin sheets of lead, carefully rolled, were employed for durability against the elements. The key was minimal weight and maximum information density. The writing implements would be extremely fine, allowing for a minuscule script. The messages were always incredibly concise, stripped down to only the most essential information. Every word counted. Every unnecessary flourish was omitted. Think of it as their ancient version of a tweet, but with even stricter character limits. Abbreviations, symbols, and often a form of shorthand were commonly used to pack more meaning into less space. Historians still argue whether some of these shorthands were standardized across the empire, or if they varied by specific lofts or individuals. But their effectiveness is clear. It's like they had developed their own form of early text messaging language, all to fit on a bird's leg. And honestly, trying to read some of those ancient messages must have been a bit like deciphering a modern doctor's handwriting, but even smaller. Quite the challenge for the recipient. To further ensure secrecy and prevent interception by rival forces, important messages were often encoded or encrypted. Simple ciphers, where letters were systematically substituted, or more complex codes known only to the sender and recipient, would be employed. Imagine the effort. A message written, then condensed, then encoded, then carefully rolled and secured to a bird's leg. Once the message was written and potentially coded, it needed to be securely attached to the pigeon without impeding its flight. This involved rolling the tiny parchment or lead sheet into a tight scroll and securing it with a fine thread or a very thin wire to one of the pigeon's legs. The attachment had to be secure enough not to fall off during flight, but light enough not to tire the bird or interfere with its aerodynamics. This meticulous preparation of messages, combining the art of miniaturization with the science of encoding, highlights the Byzantines' sophisticated approach to communication, turning a seemingly simple bird into a secure and efficient information delivery system across their vast empire. As amazing as the pigeon post was, it wasn't without its challenges. While incredibly efficient for its time, it had inherent speed and limitations that shaped its use in the vast Byzantine Empire. You release a pigeon carrying a crucial message, watching it soar into the sky. You hope for swift delivery, but you also understand the unpredictable nature of its journey. The primary advantage was speed. A pigeon could travel at speeds averaging 30 to 50 miles per hour, sometimes even faster with a tailwind. This meant that a message could cover distances in hours that would take a human messenger days or even weeks. Imagine receiving news from a city 100 miles away in just a couple of hours, allowing for a rapid response that was simply unprecedented for the era. This direct aerial route bypassed treacherous roads, mountain passes, and bandit-infested territories, making it inherently faster and often safer for the message itself. However, the major limitation was its one-way nature. A homing pigeon, by its very definition, only flies home. You could send a bird from point A to point B, but you couldn't send a reply back using the same bird, unless you had another pigeon trained to fly from B back to A, or had transported one of B's pigeons to A. This meant that for a true two-way conversation, you needed multiple flocks, or a complex system of pigeon relays, significantly increasing the logistical complexity and cost. Historians still argue whether the single-direction limitation primarily restricted its everyday use or merely encouraged concise, decisive messaging. It's like having a one-way communication channel, incredibly fast for urgent broadcasts, but not so great for a casual back-and-forth chat about weekend plans. No LOL or BRB via pigeon, I'm afraid. Other limitations included weather dependency, strong headwinds, heavy rain, dense fog, or severe storms could significantly delay a pigeon's flight, force it down, or even cause it to become disoriented and lost. Imagine a crucial military dispatch being delayed by a sudden squall over the Aegean Sea. Predators were another constant threat. Hawks, falcons, and even opportunistic eagles could easily snatch a pigeon out of the sky, along with its precious cargo. This meant a certain percentage of messages were simply lost to the vagaries of nature. There was also the inherent message capacity limitation. Only tiny, lightweight scrolls could be carried. You couldn't send a large map, a detailed drawing, or a substantial report via pigeon. Despite these drawbacks, the speed and directness offered by pigeon post, especially for urgent, concise messages, made it an indispensable tool for the Byzantines. a remarkable feat of ancient communication technology that truly soared above its contemporaries. The Byzantine pigeon post, impressive as it was, didn't exist in a vacuum. It operated alongside, and sometimes in conjunction with, other established communication rivals, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. You stand at a crossroads outside Constantinople, observing the different ways messages traveled. On one hand, a swift pigeon disappears into the sky. On the other, a dusty rider on horseback pauses to change mounts at a roadside station. The most common alternative was the human messenger, typically on horseback, or, for shorter distances, on foot. The Byzantine Empire, like its Roman predecessor, maintained an extensive network of roads and a statrum postal system known as the couriers. This system utilized relays of horses and riders, allowing for relatively swift, though still slower than pigeons, delivery of official correspondence. The advantage of human messengers was their ability to carry larger, more detailed documents, maps, or even small packages. They could also engage in two-way communication, ask questions, and adapt to changing circumstances. Imagine a messenger carrying a heavy scroll detailing complex tax reforms, something a pigeon simply couldn't lift. However, they were significantly slower, susceptible to road conditions, weather, and the ever-present threat of bandits. Historians still argue whether the cursus publicus was always efficient, or if it suffered from corruption and decay over time, but it certainly was a vital parallel system. It's like having the postal service versus email. One is slower but can handle big packages. The other is fast but only for small bits of info. And honestly, dealing with ancient road conditions sounds a lot more stressful than a slow internet connection. Beyond land-based messengers, maritime communication was vital for messages traveling across the vast Mediterranean Sea. Ships carried letters and envoys between distant ports. This was often the only way to communicate with overseas territories or trading partners. However, sea travel was entirely dependent on winds and currents, making it highly unpredictable and often very slow. A message sent by ship could take weeks or months to reach its destination. For very local communication within a city, runners or even shouts and signals from elevated positions were employed, though their range was extremely limited. Each method had its niche. The pigeon post excelled in rapid, one-way, light payload delivery over moderate to long distances, where timeliness was paramount. It filled a critical gap that other methods couldn't, complementing the slower, more robust human systems. This blend of communication technologies, with the pigeon as its agile star, demonstrates the Byzantines' pragmatic approach to information flow, leveraging every available means to keep their vast empire connected and responsive. Beyond the serious business of imperial decrees, military intelligence, and mercantile updates, the Byzantines also found some truly quirky and surprising uses for their feathered friends. You imagine a lighter side to life in Constantinople, where not every pigeon flight was about state secrets or commodity prices. Sometimes, these clever birds were employed in ways that might make you smile. One fascinating anecdotal use was in sporting events, particularly chariot races. Imagine the roar of the crowd in the hippodrome, the thundering hooves of horses, and the dust flying. When a race was over, a wealthy patron, eager to share the results immediately with friends or business partners across the city, might release a pigeon with a tiny scroll detailing the winning team. It was the ancient equivalent of a live sports update, delivered faster than any human could run or ride through the celebratory crowds. Another lesser-known application was for gourmet food delivery. While not an everyday occurrence, there are accounts of pigeons being used to transport delicate or highly prized foods, particularly from rural estates to city residences. Imagine a lord sending a freshly caught quail or a rare seasonal fruit via pigeon to his chef in Constantinople, ensuring its pristine condition. This, of course, required very small items and very sturdy pigeons, but it speaks to a creative application of their carrying capacity. Historians still argue whether pigeon-delivered snacks were a common aristocratic indulgence or a very rare novelty, but the idea is certainly charming. It's like they had their own ancient version of DoorDash, but with wings and significantly less choice on the menu. And hopefully, the pigeon didn't get too peckish on the way and nibble on the delivery. Perhaps one of the most unexpected uses was in communication between lovers. In a society with strict social conventions, where direct communication might be difficult, a discreet pigeon could carry a coded note or a small token between clandestine admirers. Imagine the fluttering heart as you await the return of your pigeon, hoping it brings a sweet reply. It was a romantic, if somewhat precarious, form of ancient flirtation. We also find occasional mentions of pigeons being used for sending samples, perhaps a small swatch of fabric from a newly arrived silk shipment to a potential buyer, or a minuscule sample of a rare spice. These peculiar applications highlight the Byzantines' ingenuity and their willingness to push the boundaries of what was possible with the technology at hand. The pigeon, far from being just a utilitarian tool, was woven into the fabric of Byzantine life in surprisingly diverse and sometimes whimsical ways, proving that ancient societies could be just as clever and creative with their resources as we are today. Beyond their practical applications, pigeons held a significant, often symbolic, place in Byzantine culture, finding their way into art, literature, and even religious symbolism, deeply integrating them into daily life. You walk through the magnificent Hagia Sophia, gazing up at mosaics that depict scenes of peace and divine presence, and you might spot the subtle, yet powerful, imagery of a dove or a pigeon. In the Christian context, the dove, a close relative of the pigeon, held profound religious significance, often symbolizing the Holy Spirit, peace, purity, and new beginnings. Imagine the comforting image of a dove descending, bringing tidings of hope or divine grace. This religious symbolism imbued pigeons with a sacred quality, even as they served mundane communication needs. Their very presence could evoke a sense of peace and divine watchfulness. Pigeons also appeared in Byzantine secular art and decorative motifs. You might see them depicted in frescoes, on illuminated manuscripts, or even as decorative elements on pottery and textiles. They represented qualities that were admired: swiftness, loyalty, and the ability to bridge distances. Their graceful flight was a source of aesthetic pleasure and inspiration. Historians still argue whether the common citizen always distinguished between the symbolic dove and the practical pigeon in their daily thoughts. But their presence in both realms is undeniable. It's like they had their own version of a national bird, one that was both a divine messenger and a reliable postman. And frankly, it's a lot more evocative than a digital icon, isn't it? In literature and poetry, pigeons were often used as metaphors for swift communication, longing, or the return of a loved one. A poet might describe a lover's heart flying home like a pigeon, or news arriving on silent, feathered wings. These literary allusions demonstrate how deeply embedded the concept of pigeon post was in the collective consciousness. Even in everyday language, phrases referencing pigeon speed or homing instincts likely entered common parlance. The act of releasing a pigeon would have been a familiar sight, a small but regular spectacle in Byzantine towns and cities. It provided a tangible link between distant places, a visible manifestation of communication in action. This dual role, as both a highly practical tool and a rich cultural symbol, elevates the Byzantine pigeon beyond mere utility. It highlights how deeply intertwined technology can become with the spirit and daily rhythm of a civilization, making the humble pigeon a truly iconic, if silent, participant in the Byzantine narrative. Given the high stakes of imperial and military communications, the security of pigeon post was a constant concern for the Byzantines, prompting various measures to prevent interception or tampering. You imagine a spy from a rival empire, perhaps an Abbasid agent, attempting to get their hands on a Byzantine message-carrying pigeon. This wasn't just about losing a message. It could mean losing a battle, or even a city. The primary method of security was the inherent nature of the homing pigeon itself. It flew directly home, often at high altitudes, making it difficult to spot or intercept without specialized tools. Unlike a human messenger who could be ambushed on a road, a pigeon's route was aerial and direct, offering a natural layer of protection. However, the Byzantines were aware of the risk. The greatest threat came from trained birds of prey, such as falcons or hawks, specifically trained by enemy forces to intercept pigeons. Imagine a trained hawk soaring high above, poised to snatch a vital message from the sky. To counter this, valuable pigeons might be released in groups, hoping that the sheer number would overwhelm a single predator, or that some would get through. Some sources even suggest that pigeons might occasionally be released with small, non-lethal bells or whistles to deter predators, though this could also draw unwanted attention. Historians still argue whether elaborate measures were widespread or if the loss rate to predators was simply accepted as a cost of business. It's like they had their own ancient version of cybersecurity, but the cyber threats had beaks and talons. And honestly, trying to outsmart a hawk sounds like a much more intense job than just running antivirus software. Beyond aerial threats, efforts were also made to secure the messages themselves. As we discussed, miniaturization and encoding were crucial. Messages were written on tiny scrolls, making them hard to spot if a bird was captured or killed. Crucially, important messages were often written in codes or ciphers, known only to the sender and intended recipient. This meant that even if a pigeon was intercepted and its message retrieved, the enemy would be left with an indecipherable string of symbols. Imagine capturing a pigeon, only to find a message that looks like a random scribble. Frustrating for the spy, but a win for Byzantine security. The pigeon lofts themselves were also guarded and often located in secure, elevated positions within fortified areas, preventing direct tampering or theft of the birds. This multi-layered approach to security, from the bird's natural instincts to human ingenuity in coding and protection, reflects the Byzantines' understanding of the critical importance of secure communication, making their pigeon post a surprisingly resilient and reliable system, even in a world full of threats. Despite its remarkable utility, like all technologies, the Byzantine pigeon post eventually faced a gradual decline in importance, slowly ceding its primary role to other communication methods as the empire itself underwent profound transformations. You stand on the ancient walls of Constantinople, looking out at a horizon where the empire's once vast influence is slowly receding. The era of the pigeon, as the supreme messenger, wouldn't last forever. Several factors contributed to its diminished role. Firstly, as the Byzantine Empire contracted and its territories shrank, the need for rapid long-distance communication over vast stretches of land lessened. Imagine a time when the most crucial messages no longer needed to cross entire seas or mountain ranges, but only shorter, more manageable distances. The immediate urgency for avian couriers, though still present, became less pervasive. Secondly, and ironically, improvements in road networks and the efficiency of human postal systems in later periods saw, by successive states, began to offer a more robust alternative. While slower, a human messenger could carry larger volumes of information, engage in two-way communication, and navigate complex social and political landscapes that a pigeon simply could not. Historians still argue whether the decline was due to the inherent limitations of pigeon post, or simply the rise of more flexible human-based systems, but both likely played a part. It's like comparing a high-speed one-way express delivery service to a more versatile two-way postal system that can handle all sorts of packages, even if it's a bit slower. Sometimes, flexibility trumps pure speed, especially when communication needs become more complex than a single urgent update. Furthermore, political instability and the frequent sieges that plagued Constantinople in its later centuries would have undoubtedly disrupted pigeon loft operations and the maintenance of reliable networks. It's hard to train and care for pigeons when your city is under constant threat. The cost and logistical effort of maintaining extensive pigeon networks, with their specialized keepers and secure lofts, might have become increasingly difficult to justify for a struggling empire. While pigeons never entirely disappeared from use, they continued to be employed in various military and personal capacities for centuries after the fall of Byzantium. Their era as a primary, widespread communication backbone began to wane. The ingenuity of the Byzantine pigeon post remains a testament to ancient innovation, but its eventual shift from prominence reminds the US that even the most effective technologies are ultimately shaped by the evolving needs and realities of the societies they serve. It's a quiet fading, like the last coo of a bird at dusk, as new dawns brought different ways of connecting. As our journey through the fascinating history of Byzantine pigeon post concludes, it's worth reflecting on how these ancient communication methods echo, often surprisingly, in our modern communication landscape. You sit in your own comfortable space, perhaps holding a smartphone or looking at a computer screen, marveling at the instant connections we forge across the globe. We've come a long way from a message tied to a bird's leg, yet the underlying human needs remain remarkably similar. Think about the speed and directness of pigeon post. An urgent message, quickly delivered, bypassing the complexities of ground travel. Doesn't that sound a lot like our instant messaging apps or email? We prioritize speed and directness for urgent updates, much like a Byzantine general prioritizing news of a battle. The desire to cut through noise and deliver concise, timely information is a timeless human need. Consider the one-way limitation of the pigeon, primarily flying home. While our digital tools offer two-way conversation, we still use one-way broadcasting for mass communication, like social media posts or news alerts. We send out information rapidly, hoping it reaches its intended audience, much like a merchant releasing a pigeon to announce a new price. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine pigeon system represents an early form of network thinking, or merely a practical solution. But its underlying principles certainly resonate today. It's like we've just swapped feathers for fiber optics. But the fundamental urge to connect, quickly and efficiently, remains the same. And honestly, How cool would it be if your boss sent important updates via a well-trained office pigeon? Just imagine the daily excitement. The Byzantine concern for message security, encoding and miniaturization to prevent interception, also finds a direct parallel in our digital world. We use encryption, secure networks, and firewalls to protect our sensitive data from prying eyes. The threat of digital hawks trying to intercept our communications is ever present. Just as actual hawks threaten Byzantine pigeons, even the very human desire for personal connection, evident in private pigeon post, is mirrored in our constant use of video calls, personal messages, and social media to stay in touch with loved ones, bridging distances with remarkable ease. The pigeon, in its humble yet profound capacity, was an early pioneer in meeting these very human communication needs. It reminds us that while the technologies change with bewildering speed, the fundamental reasons why we communicate and what we value in that communication, speed, reliability, security, and connection, are deeply rooted in our shared human history. From silent wings to instantaneous waves, the desire to reach out remains constant. As the echoes of our ancient journey gently fade, allow yourself to settle deeply, feeling the quiet embrace of the present moment. The air is still. The world outside begins to hush, inviting you into a profound calm. Release any lingering thoughts, any small whispers of the day, letting them drift away like distant clouds. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breath, soft and even, guiding you further into peace. You are safe. You are warm. You are utterly at ease. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go, but here, in this quiet, peaceful space within yourself. Drift now, serenely, into the soft embrace of sleep.